It is without question one of my favorite days of the Matt Barrie Show, presented by Allstate here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. We had Championship Friday and Saturday. We had all the fallout from Championship weekend. And today, literally moments ago, the college football playoff field, the 12-team bracket was revealed. And that's exactly where we're going to hit on today as we check in with Paul Finebaum, presented by Allstate. Paul, the rankings were just released within the last 2 minutes. The big story coming in, Alabama left out. SMU is in. Just first out of the gate, your reaction to everything we just saw on TV moments ago.
Well, I think what this committee did is what committees in intercollegiate athletics do. They try to pick their poison. In this case, they did not want to be responsible for killing conference championship games just yet. Video may have killed the radio star 30 years ago, but they did not want to be the ones who ended it because there's so much money involved and there's so many people on that committee, Matt, that are connected to big conferences. And they took the easy way out. They could have easily analyzed this differently, but clearly they decided that SMU did enough on Saturday night by coming all the way back from a blowout to nearly win the game. And they sat there as committees do and go, you know what, we appreciate their courage. And they went against everything they had said the previous Tuesday night, which is fine. I mean, listen,
Yeah.
we all saw this coming today. I mean, I'm not surprised. You're not surprised. I don't think Kalen DeBoer is surprised because this was built into the cake.
So there are a million things to get to here, and we will. And pardon me, I'm going to glance over the TV from time to time. They're just doing the live reaction as we speak. Now, the problem this morning, Paul, is there's a few that we can unpack. First problem is this. It was unfair for this to come down to SMU and Alabama because we could have picked some other teams that maybe you could point at and be like, well, they didn't really have anything special either. But because a team like Penn State was ranked highly all year, they were going to get the benefit of the doubt no matter what. Because Indiana, with one loss, was ranked highly all year because of their story. They were going to get the benefit of the doubt. And it also didn't help them that Clemson, we talked about this last week on the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate, that Clemson was the one team that was going to steal a bid. And so the fact that it came down to SMU, I don't like that SMU is going to be picked on for this because they've had one loss all season in the regular season, BYU 10-2, top 15 team, and then to Clemson. It's unfortunate that that's what it came down to, but it did. Did they make the right decision in your mind taking SMU over Alabama?
I mean, as people that serve the intercollegiate athletic world, they did because of what I said in relation
Yeah.
to the fallout. I think another thing, Mac, I heard this Friday in Atlanta among some SEC people that their biggest concern, if that scenario happened Saturday night, was that SMU would get in over Alabama. Could have been Ole Miss, could have been South Carolina, as you said. But
Right.
because of what happened a year ago when Alabama got in over FSU and everybody started threatening and filing suits, they didn't want to go through that again. And I think other than people in Alabama, nobody's feeling sorry for Alabama. And Matt, quite frankly, I don't know that many Alabama fans who feel like they got screwed. I mean, they did it to themselves. 2 weeks ago, we're sitting here talking about the blowout in Norman, and I think that haunted them. Well, that had nothing to do with this. If you listen to Ward Manuel on Tuesday night, uh, he laid out a scenario about strength of schedule and who did you beat? And that's what they used against Miami, but they didn't use that against SMU because they made it to a conference championship game.
Big bad Alabama's been in this thing numerous times. We now employ Nick Saban, and he was the reason that they were in this thing so many times. And I think you said it perfectly when he said no one's feeling sorry for Alabama. And the SEC now ultimately ends up getting 3 teams in. The Big Ten gets 4 teams in. I think that's a little bit surprising based on what we had this year. And I get all of these arguments. I get that, maybe, well, Saban said it perfect this morning when he said all records aren't created equal. And that's correct. And the problem that this format has, and I'll fight this, and I just don't think that it needs to be in there. I think if you win a conference championship, yes, you should be in the field. But the fact that Boise State and even my alma mater, Arizona State, are getting first round buys because of it, I think that's a problem. And look, I love the inclusion of a group of 5 team. But I was going at it with Boise State people all day yesterday because I thought Arizona State, based on coming from a Power Four schedule and everything they had to go through, was harder than what the Mountain West had to go through. And Boise State's in. They played a schedule and a conference that's got one, two, three, four teams, 4 out of 12 teams that have winning records, and they played one of those four twice.
Yeah, Matt, I mean, if we were really sitting here objectively, and not that we aren't, but I mean, people in college athletics, the debate today really shouldn't be about SMU. It should be about Indiana. They did absolutely nothing to earn a ticket into this field. They don't even have a good win, I don't think, do they?
No,
And they have a
no.
terrible loss. But they're America's favorite team this year. They're so they got the benefit of that. Just like on Saturday night, SMU became America's darling. And I can just hear those people in that committee room, eating their pizza at midnight, going, "Man, what an amazing comeback, Rhett Lashley's team." Just like if you were and I were little league parents, and congratulating the 7-year-old for going at it and giving it the old college try, and you're still going to get a reward. But that's what we're talking about. I mean, I don't feel with 12 teams that anybody is really getting screwed that badly. Now, in 4 teams, yeah. I mean, last year that's a real
Right.
debate. And Georgia, was it Florida State? The year before, was it Alabama? A million times on this day, was it Ohio State? But big deal. I mean, I know everybody thinks that my whole life revolves around Alabama football. It really doesn't. I haven't lived in Alabama in 11 years, and I am somehow going to make it through the end of this day, Matt, much like I know you are.
Yeah, here's right. And it's funny. You know what's funny is because we were talking about all the 12-team playoffs going to solve all the moaning and everyone complaining about everything. Well, that's not necessarily true because there's going to be more. Because when you give people more pieces of the pie, people are going to be greedy and they're going to want
Sure.
more. And if we look at Indiana, and I think the Big Ten was probably a little bit overvalued throughout the year. And I've got many examples to prove why I think they're overvalued. Taking nothing away from Indiana. Their schedule's their schedule. But Paul, they played FIU, Western Illinois, UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, Northwestern, Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, and Purdue. There is one team with a number next to their name, and it's Ohio State, and they got beat 38-15. Okay, so that's Ohio State's, or that's Indiana's ledger. The other team that I want to go to, because again, I know they played for a conference championship, but I am of the belief, and again, Nick Saban said it, and I've said this forever, all records aren't created equal. You put Ole Miss in the Mountain West, what do you think they're going to do to that? Penn
Yeah.
State played West Virginia, rivalry game, pretty good. Bowling Green, Kent State, Illinois, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Ohio State lost, Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, Maryland, and then in the Big Ten championship last night against Oregon.
I have never seen in all the years I've been around college football this many teams, quality teams, having this poor a schedule. I mean, it's remarkable. And meanwhile, Georgia had to play everyone and somehow survived it. But it is. But on the other hand, though, Matt, all those points are great. But I think Ole Miss and I think Alabama in particular. Ole Miss has a loss to a 4-8 Kentucky team. I mean,
Yeah.
that should disqualify you on one level. Alabama has 2 losses to Vanderbilt, a 6-loss team in Oklahoma. So, uh, I mean, Lane Kiffin and Kalen DeBoer can say whatever they want today, and I'm sure that they are saying it as we speak, but it doesn't carry much weight. Rhett Lashley go a little too far at midnight in Charlotte, saying it would be criminal if they kept us out? It wouldn't be criminal. It really wouldn't be a big deal at all. But by the way, I'm sure he's thinking, why should we get kept out if Indiana is in there? So this is just the way that I mean, I knew this was a bad system, but I didn't realize until this very moment, when you look at the bracket, how utterly bad this was. But the reason why we got it for the final time is that the Big Ten commissioner, the ACC, and the Pac-12 guys all blew up after Oklahoma and Texas went to the SEC, and they had to have a unanimous consent. So they were handing out Christmas presents to anyone who would say, "Yes, we'll vote for the 12-team playoff," and this is what we got.
Yeah, and when you factor all of this in, I don't know. Like I said it for the past couple of weeks. If I were Ole Miss, I'd be ticked off because let's just somehow in football we got into losses instead of wins, right? Well, who'd you lose to? Well, if we're gonna play that game, Ole Miss lost to a 7-5 Florida team, an 8-4 LSU team, and a bad Kentucky team. Alabama lost to two 6-6 teams, which isn't a good look. And they had the near loss to South Carolina. And so I think Ole Miss had as big argument as anybody. And oh, by the way, Ole Miss beat Georgia, and so did Alabama. So when all things are equal, and you look at they both beat Georgia, fine, equal. Now let's look at the rest of them. And I think Alabama's losses were far worse than Ole Miss losses. Yet Alabama, this whole time, has given the benefit of the doubt over a team like Ole Miss, and that's where I'm
Meanwhile,
getting confused. Even South Carolina.
meanwhile, Texas still trying to figure out who they beat this year. I mean, they got a pretty good. They got a home game against a three-loss team. That's not a bad spot to be in, and same for Penn State. I mean, the conference champion. Even though I just got through arguing that giving it to Alabama would have blown up the conference championship games, the conference championship games really only helped one school, and that was Clemson. They got to buy
Hey,
a ticket in one they really don't deserve. I mean, but the one thing about Clemson too, though, they get a chance to finish the season 0-3 in the SEC if they lose the Texas game.
that's true because they've got Texas in round one in Austin. So the home games in the college football playoff, again, the top four seeds that have advanced to the quarterfinals: Arizona State out of the Big 12, Oregon out of the Big 10, Boise out of the Mountain West, Georgia out of the SEC. Those are your first round buys. The first round matchups: Clemson at Texas, Tennessee at Ohio State, SMU at Penn State, Indiana at Notre Dame. So your four home sites: Texas, beautiful climate this time of year, Ohio State freezing, Penn State freezing, Notre Dame freezing. But they get Indiana, who's used to cold weather. SMU might have a difficulty out at Penn State. It's not like Tennessee's Florida, but you got to go up to Ohio State. Those first round matchups are intriguing, Paul. Is there anyone in particular that catches your eye?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously Tennessee. I mean, because that is what I would call the only true mark. I mean, just must-see game. Um, I'm sorry, if Alabama had been in there, we were projecting an Alabama Notre Dame game. I mean, Clemson, Texas is interesting because there will be a lot of orange in that game. As far as Indiana Notre Dame, I don't know. I mean, I think the networks have a real. I don't know. I don't know if this is even out yet, but it's going to be really hard to force Notre Dame. I mean, which games do you put? I mean, you obviously put Tennessee, Ohio State in the most valuable slot, but after that,
Right.
or any of those games, that attractive.
And if you're Indiana, you're loving that you're going to South Bend,
Yeah,
Indiana. It's in your home state, kind
I
of a
got
home
about
game
like
for
a
them.
10-minute drive.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because now when you look at the slate of playoff games, there's that first one on December 20th, prime time.
Right.
That's the only one being played that night. And then the following day, there's three games. There's two on TNT up against the NFL. And then there's the night one ABC prime time. And I would argue Saturday night ABC, that's probably the best slot of opening
Oh
weekend.
yeah,
The second one I would argue is the Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. So it is
absolutely.
going to be interesting to see what the network chooses to
Yeah, I
do,
mean,
which
clearly
to
there's a number one game, but what's the number two game?
number one to me, and it's a runaway. It's Tennessee, Ohio
Yeah,
State. I mean, that's the one
absolutely.
you throw, I think, Saturday night primetime ABC. If I'm going based on story and numbers, purely just story and ratings potential, I'm going Indiana, Notre Dame
Yeah,
on Friday night
I think you're right.
because that's the Cinderella and that's Notre Dame who gets eyeballs. And then you can fight over the rest: SMU, Penn State, Clemson, and Texas. Quickly, because I know we always forget about this because we go to the rankings. I'm interested in your thoughts on championship Saturday, namely that SEC slug out between Georgia and Texas.
Yeah, I mean, it was a couple of weird things about it. There were empty seats. I haven't seen empty seats at that game in forever. and there were a lot of empty seats, Matt. Uh, it was just a miserable first half, but I think we made up for it in the second half. I mean, it was intriguing. Uh, I mean, and I thought it ended with just absolute drama. I mean, it's hard to
Yeah.
come up with a more incredible last couple of minutes. And that's what you will remember about the game. You won't remember suffering through the first half. I came out of it, so impressed with Kirby Smart and the Odyssey this year that he has been on, starting out number one and really not having a great team. I mean, he just got through so many different bumps. And I came away with questions about Texas, like what is the
Yeah.
deal? Uh, Quinn Ewers never really rose to the occasion in that game yesterday. Carson Beck, I mean, I don't know how he even got the snap to hand it off to ETN.
That's a storyline now
Yeah,
because how hurt is he?
that is a great line. You know, all the people going crazy last night comparing him to Jordan Travis before they won the game was really interesting. But I mean, I felt great for Kirby Smart because I mean, you don't feel sorry for a guy with two national championships in his pocket, but he did. And what probably the most interesting in the moment, I know this is not a big thing on the national level. But Matt, the fact that on the actual stage, while he was being interviewed by Laura, it was Greg Sankey standing next to
Oh,
him, about to present him the trophy. And that's one of the biggest moments of the year. I mean, the SEC commissioner gives out the trophy to everybody, but how do you get any bigger than that? And Kirby Smart just put a dagger down. I was curious what you thought about that.
so the only saving grace Kirby got out of that shot at Greg Sankey and his team for putting him on the road every week, the only saving grace he got out of that is we had already switched networks to the ACC game.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
So that didn't make
It
it
was not on
on
national
ABC.
TV. Okay.
No, added or because of the overtime, we had already moved on, and so if you
Okay.
saw it, it was on social media or something. That was his only saving
Yeah.
grace. And I can't imagine even today,
And
Charlie Hussey
in front of
or
15 million people, that would have been worse.
that could have been a problem. Yeah, and I'm sure that would not have been a nice handshake moving forward in that one. So championship weekend always delivers. You're right. The first quarter, 2, 3 quarters of that SEC championship was football melatonin, but everybody's going to remember the end. And I think it was a classic between the two. Texas loses to a team twice this season for the first time since 1909. It was Texas A&M, in case you're wondering. So finally, because we're gonna have this, and you and I will be on TV later today. It's a long day for everybody. Who do you ultimately believe ends up in the national championship game?
I think at this point, I'm probably adjusting. I'm moving away from Ohio State, even though they have been mine. I'm saying Oregon and Georgia. Assuming I think they're in. I don't even know if they're in. Are they? Do they face each other
I
before?
can, yeah, no, I can confirm that you did do the bracket correctly in your head. They would not meet
Okay.
until the national championship game.
Okay.
It's funny. I have an Ohio State Georgia national championship.
Okay.
I think Ohio State understands they're playing with house money, and I still think they're the most talented roster in college football. A la what we saw a few years ago when Ohio State could have beaten
Right.
Georgia in the semifinal. I think it's going to be something similar, although they don't have CJ Stroud at quarterback. They have Will Howard. So it's set. The college football playoff 12 team edition is here, and shocking. Everyone's still complaining about it. So for those of you that thought the 4 team to 12 was going to stop the argument, wrong number one. Wrong number two, it didn't dilute the regular season. It made it even better than we could have ever imagined. We're so happy we took it with you every step of the way. Paul Finebaum, Matt Barrie, Rankin's reaction the second it went down here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. And we will take you through the postseason as we go from 12 to 2 in Atlanta. For Paul Finebaum, I'm Matt Barrie. Thanks for watching the Matt Barrie Show, presented by Allstate here on the College Football YouTube channel.